achieved.
So I get it. Jose Aldo is one of the greatest of all time. The guy was a dominant featherweight champion in WEC and UFC, and then he comes down to bantamweight, and I predicted him to win against Marlon Moraes. I felt he did win against Marlon Moraes, and he gets robbed in a very close decision. And now the rumor is, and maybe by the time you're listening to this, it's not a rumor anymore, that he is going to fight Henry Cejudo for the bantamweight title. I don't like it. I think it really muddies the water on the legitimacy of title shots and title contention when you have a guy coming off a loss. He doesn't even have a win in the division. He's coming off a loss, and he gets a title shot. I get it. Again, although it has it has had an incredible run, but that's not okay. And Aljamain Sterling is a guy who's calling out for it, and I feel like Sterling is a guy who deserves an opportunity. He's a contender. He's had his ups, he's had his downs, he's had his opportunities, and he just hasn't quite got there, but he's definitely in line. And I feel like he, everything considered, give Sterling the shot at Cejudo. It's a good fight. Give Aldo another fight, a winnable fight. He wins that one, then give him the title shot against the winner. I'm cool with that. But it just doesn't look good for the sport when you're giving a guy coming off a loss, devoid of a victory within the division, a shot at the title, if that happens. Again, I know Cejudo's calling for it. I know sometimes the champions want those big money fights. But at some point, the UFC's got to say, no, this doesn't make sense. So, it just, make it right. Make the rankings and contention and winning fights mean something. And even though, again, I felt Aldo won the fight and got robbed by the judges, ultimately the judges determined that based on the preset rules and the established understanding on both fighter sides that the judges would determine a winner should they not get a finish, that Marlon Moraes won that matchup. So, welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson. On this episode of the show, we are breaking in the upcoming UFC Fight Night 169, which will go down on February 29th in Norfolk, Virginia. I'll be giving you my 5 main card predictions on this episode of the show, including a title fight, which will crown the 3rd UFC flyweight champion, men's flyweight champion in the history of the promotion. So I'll get you that. My bet packs are for sale. I'm coming off another, 7-5. Just not a great night. I won some key fights. Losing the co-main event with Omi Lanchuk not getting, not Omi Lanchuk. I'm thinking of another heavyweight fighter. Oli Sejchuk, not getting the victory certainly hurt. I would have finished the night 8-4 with a respectable record and cashed in on some nice little returns. It's just it didn't come through. My silver bets cashed in, my gold bets did not. Again, a little frustrating. I just got to find my way out of the funk that I'm currently in and see if I can turn things around. We've got 5 good fights here and an interesting set of prelims. We've had this fight's definitely struggled. This card's definitely had some issues with injury staying intact. So that's if you look at this card and you wonder why it's not as strong as it could have been, because you're looking at Alex Oliveira, Mickey Gall off the fight card, Chaz Skelly off the fight card, a couple other nice little fights that were scheduled to be on here. Steven Peterson, another good, entertaining fighter, also pulled off. So just not an ideal sequence of injuries to pull off, to see guys pull out of this event. Nonetheless, we're going to do our best to come up with some predictions. You can follow me on Twitter at KO_predictions. And again, as I said, kamikazeoverdrive.net. For everything else I post. And again, if you are brand spanking new to my channel, please subscribe, click the like button and the notification so you get notified every time I post a video. We post a video every single week for every single event and have since I believe, I want to say 2010. I think it's 2010 is officially when I started. It's hard to remember all that time back there. Nonetheless, let's get to our first main card prediction. Fight number 1 on the main card takes place in the UFC featherweight division as the 14-1 Grant Dawson takes on the well-traveled debuting veteran 24-10 Darrick Minner. Now, looking at this matchup here, this was again one of the multiple fights impacted by injury. Dawson was actually set to face Chaz Skelly, but Skelly pulled out. And earlier in 2020, Chaz Skelly and Dawson were also scheduled to meet, and Dawson had to pull out of that matchup. So this, back and forth. Maybe they will fight eventually, but not at this event. Now, Dawson comes into this fight 2-0 in the UFC. He's won 5 in a row since his first career loss, and only career loss. He's coming off a submission over Trezano, which is pretty impressive. He had a dominant decision over Julian Erosa in his debut. And he went 2-0 in 2019 after a long layoff from his 2017 previous pro experience. For Minner, he's an LFA veteran. He lost to Herbert Burns in the Contender Series. He did submit UFC veteran Clay Collard, lost to Jordan Griffin. He's fought other guys, Luke Sanders as well, another guy along the way. He's fought several UFC veteran fighter. So, a decent and long career, 34 pro fights. Now, physically, Dawson, 3 inches taller, 2 inch reach of finish. He's 4 years younger. Minner has been listed as a 155er. So it's worth noting that he's fighting in a division that isn't always his home. Now, looking at Dawson first, the guy's been an absolute takedown machine in the UFC. 9 takedowns in 2 fights, which has been just over 4.5 rounds. He's averaging 2 takedowns per round, which is pretty solid, especially with his top control and pressure. For his career, he's got 3 wins by knockout, but more importantly, 10 submission wins, which tells us once he gets the fight to the floor, you are in an extreme position of danger against this guy, as he can press and he can get you out of there with a submission. Now, I like what I see out of Dawson. He maintains tight body pressure. Even when you're standing, it's clinch, pressure, push you into the cage, move you around, wear you down, wait for that moment where you get off balance or make a mistake, and he will drag you to the floor. I really like the way when he sets up his body lock or clinch takedowns, when he takes you down, he's already advancing position. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Josh Barnett, where when you hit the mat, he's already in side control, already in mount, he's in a strong position and can go from that spot where you're already on the defensive far greater than you would normally be with a traditional takedown into guard. Now, when he fought Trezano, he moved to his back very quickly. He has 8 wins by rear naked choke, so obviously that is his position of choice and his submission of choice. He does a nice job of stretching guys out, putting a lot of pressure on that lower back and hip area, which makes it very difficult for you to get out of that spot and just limits your movement and eventually forces you to expose your neck and gets the submission. His striking is still very much a work in progress. He was eating some shots against Arosa, but keep in mind that was a fight that he was coming in off a long layoff. It was his debut, and it wasn't his ideal situation. He got tired in that matchup as the fight progressed. Again, it just wasn't ideal, but he still got it and got the win. Now, looking at Minner, the guy's got a ton of fight experience, as I previously mentioned, 34 career fights, 21 of his 24 wins by submission. To suggest this guy knows how to submit guys is absolutely accurate. When he fought Herbert Burns, who Gilbert Burns' brother, a very good grappler in his own right, he got right to Burns' back early in that matchup. He was doing a good job of swinging wildly and being aggressive on the feet and looking to set up his takedowns, changing levels and scoring takedowns. He went for a choke at one point against Burns, which was kind of a mistake, got caught in transition, got stuck in a triangle and submitted. And now you look at the flip side of things. Of his 10 career losses, 7 have come by submission. So he's one of these guys who, he's a very active grappler. He's very good and he's very aggressive, but at times he can get reckless, and his willingness to go for a submission over position hadn't cost him and has cost him. Now, he is good at working to superior position, and he's pretty crafty. He's one of these guys who knows a lot of things. His last fight, he won by shoulder choke or Von Flue choke, depending on what you want to call it. Again, I'm not a grappling expert, but I looked at him like that looks like a Von Flue choke, but it's referred to as a shoulder choke, at least in the records. So if anybody can post in the comments what the difference is, I'd love to know. Nonetheless, it was one of those chokes where his opponent held the guillotine from a bad position for too long. He's able to put him to sleep, which is very impressive. Now, again, it could be argued that his aggression and recklessness and activity rate on the mat is what gets him in trouble on the ground, that he's too confident in his submission skills and ultimately gets put in some bad spots, as it was the case against Burns, and gets submitted. Now, the way I look at it is that Minner is, again, crafty on the mat, but ultimately Dawson is just too positionally sound and less reckless, and I like that aspect about him. We also are looking at the fact that the lack of a full camp could cost Minner in a fight that's high-paced on the, a lot of transitions, a lot of grappling attacks, a lot of pressure, a lot of carrying your opponent's weight. And as the fight advances, I would think Minner will start to slow down a little bit, and we will see Dawson start to press the pace a little bit more and a little bit more. Look for Dawson to defend some tough spots early on. Look for Minner to shoot him for takedowns. Work to that superior position. Again, Dawson will take advantage of Minner's willingness to go for submissions that aren't quite there, and maybe against another good grappler will ultimately cost him a spot. Eventually, Minner gets put on the mat with Dawson on his back in his preferred position, and my prediction is Dawson Grant to defeat Darrick Minner by submission. The first of 2 women's featherweight fights goes down on the main card here as the 10-4 Megan Anderson takes on the undefeated and debuting 4-0 Norma Dumont Viana. Now, this is a very interesting matchup simply because the division isn't very deep, so if they're going to try and develop a bit of a division, obviously these girls are early in their UFC careers and certainly have an opportunity to make some headway and get into a title shot with a couple wins. I don't know if that's the case, if they're going to let Nunes defend that 145-pound title, or they're going to opt to take it away from her and try to build the division almost out of spite for Cyborg, saying, hey, now that you're gone, we're going to try and build a division and maybe take some of the talent away from Bellator and make it less of an option. Now, I would think of the 2, Megan Anderson's definitely the girl they would be looking towards to be one of those big name fighters they build around. She's coming off a victory where she submitted fellow main carder Fairn. She's 2-2 in the UFC with losses to Spencer and who's also fighting later on, and Holly Holm. Vienna 4-0 said she's fought in Shudo and Jungle fights, 2 submission wins, 2 decisions. Now, physically, Anderson's a big girl, 6 inches taller. She'll have a 5-inch reach advantage as well, which is worth knowing. Same age. Vienna has been out for almost 2 years, which is also a concern. And, of course, she's making her debut. Now, the quality of opposition for Vienna isn't amazing, but she's only 4 fights into her career, so what do you really expect at this point? Now, the first big noteworthy thing you look at here, the scenario that jumps off the page, is the fact that Anderson has 2 submission losses on her record and a takedown-based decision loss to Holly Holm, and Vienna has 50% of her wins, 2 of 4, by submission, which tells us, could she exploit Megan Anderson's potential vulnerability on the mat? It's possible. Anderson's a jiu-jitsu purple belt, so she's certainly not a fish out of water. She does have 3 submission wins. Has she done enough to dispel any concerns about her grappling deficiencies? I don't know. She's coming off that submission win. I'm not sure she has. It all depends on the quality of opponent she's facing. It's worth noting here she's a pretty big girl, and she's going to pose some problems for Vienna, who doesn't appear to have amazing wrestling. Vienna most likely is going to try and come in and overpower her and get her to the ground. You know, Anderson's physically strong, and one thing I like about her is she's pretty solid in the clinch, and she can do some damage. So in the event Vienna tries to come in and clinch up with her and take her down, that could turn out to be a negative exchange for her. Vienna's striking technique is decent, but again, not world-beating, and Anderson hits pretty hard, is pretty long, and is a better striker overall. Covering that distance because of that length and that damage she could be facing could be very difficult for the UFC newcomer. And again, once she gets in, she needs to avoid getting stuck in the clinch where she could get further beat on. Now, you look at Vienna, and again, she has some submission chops. She has minimal MMA experience. She is a far cry from the very experienced Holly Holm, who fought a perfect game plan to defeat Anderson, and the grappling skills of Felicia Spencer, also jiu-jitsu black belt, far superior, and those are the 2 girls that have beaten Anderson. I think Anderson continues to get better and show us what she's truly capable of, and what her pre-UFC form back in Invicta was all about. And I think she shows us another step in the right direction. And my prediction is Megan Anderson to defeat Norma Dumont Vienna by TKO. Fight number 3 in the main card goes down in the UFC's light heavyweight division, and a very fun fight as the 15-4 Ion Cutelaba takes on the 12-1 Magomed Ankalaev in what should be a hard-hitting back-and-forth battle. Again, it's an interesting matchup at light heavyweight because these 2 fighters are kind of on the outside looking in. They're good fighters. I believe I can't remember off the top of my head if they're both close to the rank. I think Ankalaev is ranked. I don't think Cutelaba is. But they both know that a win here probably propels one of the winner into a better spot to really contend and start getting some bigger name opportunities. Now, Cutelaba is coming off a TKO victory over Khalil Roundtree. He has 3 wins in his last 4. His only loss coming against former title challenger Glover Teixeira in a submission, coming by submission, a fight he had a good start in. He had that TKO win over Ankalaev as well, which really put him on the map. For Ankalaev, he's won 3 in a row after that shocking last-second submission defeat in his debut against Paul Craig. And of those 3 wins, he's finished 2 of them, so he's also starting to get his, that little bit of shine back on his prospects, if you will. Physically, Ankalaev 2 inches taller. They have the same reach. Cutelaba is the younger man by a year. So both these guys come from wrestling backgrounds. Ankalaev, though, despite his success in the regional scenes, has not put up massive takedown numbers in the UFC, 1 or less takedown each of his fights, and he actually gave up 2 completions in his debut. For Cutelaba, he's actually had a little more success in volume. He had 4 against Khalil Roundtree in under 2 rounds. 6 against Jerry Cannonier in a fight he ultimately lost. Conversely, prior to finishing Ankalaev, he got taken down on 3 different occasions. So there's enough to suggest their wrestling could cancel each other out, but there's also enough concern to suggest that if one of these guys can find an edge, the other could give up a takedown or 2, which could be, in a decision, could be crucial. Now, Ankalaev is incredibly solid from top position. He's got that good control and ground and pound fight-ending ability, and that's huge. Now, Cutelaba against Roundtree, who he recognized had a deficiency on the ground, absolutely smashed the guy. Postured up nicely, was able to get a strong top base, and was hammering down with some full-fledged punches and elbows that eventually forced the official to step in and stop the fight. And again, with finishing ability, both these guys have got it in spades. They've demonstrated they're able to finish. Cutelaba stopped 3 of his 4 UFC wins. His decision, his other fight, 12 of his 15 overall wins have come by knockout. So it tells you what he's all about. For Ankalaev, he scored a pair of knockout wins as well. 7 of his 13 wins by knockout. He stopped his last opponent with a front kick. He broke Abreu's nose, even though he couldn't get him out there because Abreu's a tough son of a bitch. He against Marcin Prachnio, he knocked him out with a head kick. So again, getting hands and feet, and I guess feet and legs on opponents and doing damage is part of is what's made him successful. Now, while there are a ton of similarities we've just highlighted, wrestling, finishing skills, overall, capabilities, there is one key difference that I think gives one of these two guys an edge, and I think it's the cardio factor. Cutelaba is 1-3. The Hulk's 1-3 in fights that go outside of the first round. That's in the UFC. He slowed after a very strong start against Glover Teixeira and lost that fight. Prior to coming to the UFC, he only had one fight go outside of the opening round, and it lasted a whole 29 seconds into round 2. So he doesn't have a lot of experience going beyond that first round. So that's worth noting here. For Ankalaev, he has gone to round 3 and 1 time to round 4 9 times, and he has won 8 of them. The only one being that fight that he dominated start to finish against Craig and then lost at the end. He has a solid track record of displaying respectable cardio and just putting together an elongated fight plan with success. That's huge. When Cutelaba starts to fade, he just isn't the same fighter. His aggression backs off, his movement backs off. He's still dangerous, but it's just not like it is, and he can be impressed upon. That's what Glover was able to do, take him down and got him out of there. And with the combination of Ankalaev's striking power and his wrestling, that's going to be a huge concern for Cutelaba if this fight gets into round 2 and especially into round 3. Cutelaba, I think he needs to get him out of there quickly. Ankalaev so far has proven very durable, very difficult to get out of there. I'm not saying impossible, because Cutelaba hits hard, but I think we could see something similar to the Misha Serkinov fight, where Cutelaba simply held his own early, didn't do enough, and then got finished as the fight progressed. So my prediction is Magomed Ankalaev to defeat Ion Cutelaba by TKO. We going back now to the women's featherweight division, which has been rarely said in the UFC. We are now in the co-main event of the evening as the Canadian 7-1 Felicia Spencer takes on the 6-3 Zarah Fairn in what could be a fight that, again, if they're looking for a title challenger for the featherweight crown, if they're looking to start strip Nunes of the title and get a new division started up and kicked off, the winner of this is in prime position to contend for that. The UFC, again, like I said, it appears to be investing in this division, so we'll see how that goes. Now, Spencer defeated Megan Anderson by submission in her debut. Very impressive. I got that one bang on. Went the distance with Cyborg in defeat. Showed a lot of toughness. Actually cut Cyborg and definitely demonstrated her willingness to go toe-to-toe with one of the most dangerous women of all time. Now, for Fairn, she debuted versus Megan Anderson and got submitted, which is concerning. She had won 3 in a row prior to that. Fairn 2 inches taller, 4-inch reach advantage, and she is 4 years older than Felicia Spencer. Now, Fairn's a pretty good size fighter, not small by any stretch of the imagination. She will want to try and use her size as a factor in this fight. Didn't have that edge against Anderson, so she'll probably want to show that here if she can. She came out really aggressive against Megan and was landing some decent strikes early on, backed her up, but got walked right into a body lock and taken down. And that's not surprising that she would have taken that approach when she has 4 wins by knockout. And then considering that Anderson's not a grappler, you look at that and you go, okay, she's probably not going to try and take me down, and yet here she is. She does, and she has a lot of success doing it. In that fight, Anderson eventually mounted her, and Fairn, while a jiu-jitsu purple belt, just like Megan is, got stretched out, got laid out on the mat, looked kind of flat and stuck in a lot of spots, tried to get up, but just didn't seem to have the tools. And the commentators were pointing out that, yeah, she wasn't actually using skill and technique to try and get out of some bad spots. She was trying to burst her way out of there with physical strength and just raw horsepower, and it wasn't working. And eventually, while she was able to get out of one bad spot, she put herself directly back in another, got put into a triangle, and got tapped out. Enter Felicia Spencer, a jiu-jitsu black belt who tapped out the girl that tapped out Fairn, and you look at that and you go, okay, MMA math would suggest that that's not a good scenario, and a lot of times MMA math doesn't work, but it's hard to overlook that here. Spencer's a jiu-jitsu black belt. She had a very similar performance against Megan Anderson, got in close, got her down, got to her back, got a rear naked choke. She has 4 wins by submission, all by rear naked choke. Debuted with a TKO victory on the mat as well, so she's a ground-based fighter. Nothing shocking there. She's double tough. She took that beating at Cyborg, which cut her, and she hung in. And cut Cyborg. She hung in there. Is there any concerns about the beating that Cyborg put on her impacting her here? Possibly, but I really don't think so. She's not a great striker, but again, she'll throw some technique and brawl and use that to close the distance, which again is not surprising here. Ultimately, and I'm not going to say anything groundbreaking, Fairn needs to stay vertical. That's the key here, especially considering she got submitted by a lesser grappler than in Anderson. She cannot afford to go to the mat with Felicia Spencer. Fairn doesn't have a lot of long fight experience also, so while Spencer does and has shown she can fight deeper into fights, if she can't get the early submission, look for her to continue to wear on her opponent, put her in some bad spots, tire her out, and fatigue as it sets in, it becomes harder and harder to defend, and that's what will be a key factor here. Ultimately, look for Felicia Spencer to eventually get her down, get to her back, set up that her ideal submission, and my prediction is Felicia Spencer to defeat Zarah Fairn by submission. Finally, now we move to the main event of the evening, in which we will crown a new UFC flyweight champion, the third in the promotion's history, as the 28-5-0 former title challenger Joseph Benavidez takes on the 17-1 Deiveson Figueiredo in what should be a fairly entertaining fight. Benavidez has won 4 consecutive bouts, has been beating the best of the division -1, which is the former champion. He's a winner in 9 of his last 10. His only loss was a very close, contentious split decision against Serghei Pettis. He's fought for the UFC title twice on 2 occasions, losing both to Demetrius Johnson. For Figueiredo, he's won back-to-back bouts in 6 of his last 7 in the UFC. He submitted former title challenger Tim Elliott, decision victory over Alexandre Pantoja, my apologies. 4 TKO victories inside the UFC, including John Moraga, another former title challenger. His only loss against Jussier Formiga during this stretch. Physically, Figueiredo 1 inch taller, he'll have a 3-inch reach advantage, and he's the younger fighter by 3 years. Now, Benavidez has fought for 3 major titles in his career, twice in the UFC, once in WEC. DJ twice, Dominic Cruz once. 0-3 in that stretch. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on. He owns a close win over Henry Cejudo, the current champion, the man about to lose title, and current bantamweight champion. So that's certainly, it was contentious. A lot of people thought Cejudo won that fight, and I tend to agree with them, even though I had Benavidez to win it. Figueiredo has looked impressive, but his recent loss to Formiga still stands out on his record. Formiga is noteworthy for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, he's the biggest name in the division, I would say, or for a long time anyway, to not get a shot at the title. When they were looking for guys for DJ to fight, Figueiredo or Formiga couldn't get the opportunity because guys were using him as a stepping stone. John Dodson, Joseph Benavidez, Henry Cejudo, Ray Borg, and then Joseph Benavidez again have all used Formiga to beat him and then fight for the title in their next fight. So that's huge. And then Figueiredo had that opportunity, and he actually lost to Formiga. Now he's rebounded with two wins, but that is a little concerning here. But again, styles make fights. For Figueiredo, he hits exceptionally hard. One of the hardest in the division, if not the hardest in the division. 8 wins by knockout. He moves forward and absolutely smashes guys. He smashed Pantoja from start to finish. Couldn't get him out of it. It was a great fight. Heard him, had him in a lot of trouble. I highly recommend you going back and watching that one. He also has a much better submission game than people give him credit for, and realize he caught Elliott with a guillotine choke, the 4th guillotine choke of his career. I think he has 6 or 7 submission victories overall. And he's a pretty diverse fighter with a lot of tools. A lot of very dangerous guy. Now, Joseph Benavidez, he's a veteran. Similar finishing numbers, 8 wins by knockout, 9 wins by submission. The guy's been around for absolutely ever. He stopped the aforementioned Formiga. He fought him twice, actually. And he beat Alex Perez as well, stopping him with strikes. Very impressive. His striking has improved. He's not a huge volume guy, but he does a good job defensively. And he has more pop than we give him credit for as well. His submission game solid. 5 wins by guillotine choke, submitted the aforementioned Tim Elliott. His time spent with Team Alpha Male makes him a very dangerous grappler, good wrestler. Got very good chokes. He's going to be hard to choke as well. I think one of the big keys here is his championship fight experience. He's 3-1 Figueiredo is 3-1 in decisions, and everything else he has fought has been finished before round 3. For Joe, he's 11-4 in decisions. He has 2 5-round fights on his record that he lost both via split decision, like fights that went the full 5. And the question is, can Figueiredo hold up in rounds 4 and 5? If he doesn't win all 3 of the first 3 rounds, how is he going to do in rounds 4 and 5? Will he be able to do that? Will he have to slow down his early pace to be able to go rounds 4 and 5? That can be a difficult adjustment for a guy. Now, it's worth noting that Joe was knocked out by DJ. The former champion took him out and KO'd him in their second appearance, and that raises the question, if Demetrius Johnson can knock you out, and DJ is a far more dangerous fighter, a lot of people give him credit for, Figueiredo could knock him out as well. Cejudo hurt Benavidez, Pettis actually hurt Benavidez as well, and Figs has bigger power than all those guys, so that's certainly something we need to be aware of in this fight. And Figueiredo, his only career loss came against Formiga was a grappling-based loss. He could not stay vertical, and it kind of muted his power. It took it out of the equation, which is obviously concerning here. Other fighters who've gone toe-to-toe with him on the feet have absolutely had concern, have struggled, and had issue. Joe did land some takedowns, 7 in his recent win over Dustin Ortiz. He had 2 in the Pettis fight, so it's certainly an option. I wouldn't be surprised to see him go there and try and force Figueiredo to work hard early in that fight and maybe put him in some bad spots. I think Joe's motivated by his title opportunity here. He's been more confident late. He's looked good. I think he's one of these guys who is, again, I'm not a huge Joe Benavidez fan, in fact, but I think this is his opportunity. He realizes this is his chance to go out and get a championship, and possibly his last opportunity to do so in a division that a lot of people thought was his, and DJ came and took it from him. He's experienced. He's more experienced. He's a little more diverse as far as I'm concerned. This could be a very close, very close fight, especially in the first half, first 3 rounds. I think Joe's experience, his cardio edge, and his style give him the edge as this fight advances. Be very mindful of the fact that Figueiredo could knock him out inside the first 15 minutes with his power and how crushing he can be with his big shots. But I think Benavidez rises to the occasion here and finally gets the nod and gets some UFC gold. So my prediction is Joseph Benavidez to defeat Deiveson Figueiredo by decision and become the new UFC flyweight champion. So those are my 5 main card predictions for UFC Fight Night 169. All of my preliminary picks will be at kamikazeoverdrive.net. So will the bet packs. Again, I'm not doing too shit hard with the bet packs. Full disclosure, full honesty, I'm not doing that well. My results will be posted. I actually haven't posted the results from the last event. I've been really strapped for time right now. I got a couple major things going on in both with my job and the other multiple hobbies that I partake in. So I'm doing my best to get things up and running. They will be posted. I just have to get there. So again, if you are having success, fantastic, and I really applaud anybody who can have success over a prolonged period of time in this sport, predicting and being on top of things. So keep it up. That's awesome for you. Again, please comment, please like. Constructive criticism, always a positive. Just don't be a jackass. That's all I ask. And just straight up, thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And we got a lot of fights coming up, so I got to get back to work here. Talk soon, guys. Take care. Hi.